the turmoil of the Industrial Revolution, the socioeconomic transformation that will happen in the late 1700s in Britain into the 1800s and in the continent during the 1800s, will not just have a profound effect on everyone, where people are living, moving to cities, and the jobs people are having, but will, of course, impact women. Now, many women will be able to have jobs in factories, but they get incredibly low wages. Women were, in fact, sometimes favored over men because they have smaller fingers that were more nimble for machinery. And likewise with children, which were highly sought after sometimes for being able to, work with machinery. And of course, women being often smaller than men would be better in mines. And so women were working in horrific conditions in mines, often young girls. And so for working class women during the 19th century, we see that conditions can be quite horrific in urban areas. Prostitution, exploitation in factories, and in mines. And remember, their bosses were often always males, and there was a lot of sexual exploitation of women too. So, however, the industrialization of the 19th century leads to a growing middle class. And so we have to think about what's happening to those middle class women. So, whenever you have an essay about social order in the 19th century, or the social order with the Industrial Revolution, or with women during this time, you always want to think about those middle-class people and how different their experience is from the working-class people. The Industrial Revolution is a fundamentally different event. Different experiences depending on where you were in it. For the middle class, it's leading to unprecedented wealth and access to travel overseas, and new ideas and information, education. But in the first half of the 19th century, for the working class, industrialization is leading to these horrific conditions and exploitation in factories, urban, grimy cities. And so it's a different experience depending on where you are. And likewise for women. Whereas working class women are working as prostitutes, are being exploited in factories, and working in these dark mines, long hours. Of course, still working in the domestic industry, providing domestic service for houses for this middle class, which is growing, by the way. So there's a lot of people that are looking for nannies and other things like that. For middle class women, the Industrial Revolution will be quite good, right? They will be able to not have to work. And so many women begin withdrawing from the workforce. And this is actually something we see throughout the 19th century. As it continues, as standards of living increase, more and more families will have enough money so that the wife doesn't need to work. The cult of domesticity starts with the middle class. The ideal woman from the ideal family has a husband who makes enough money as a manager, as an owner, as a banker, as a lawyer, as a government official. The ideal system as a male that makes enough money so that the female doesn't have to work, so that she can raise the children. And inspired by Rousseau, the idea is that these children need to experience the world. Children need to be able to, children are each individuals, and therefore there is a focus during the 19th century amongst the middle class on having fewer children and nurturing them more, educating them, preparing them to be part of the, to be part of the elite, to be part of the bourgeoisie of the next generation. And so what we see amongst working, historically, large families were beneficial when you needed to make a lot of, when you had to have a lot of farmers working on the fields, or they were beneficial with the cottage industry too, making stuff in your house. Having more kids meant more people to make things. But with the Industrial Revolution, the benefits of having more kids are not apparent. And so in the middle class, we'll start to see smaller families being the ideal. Now, in the late 19th century, we'll have continued economic growth as industrialization continues. So more and more women will be withdrawing from the workforce. There'll be more and more laws put in place forbidding women working in mines, forbidding women working in factories. And so therefore the economic opportunities for women will decrease as the 19th century continues. And the social norm is that a woman shouldn't work. And as more and more people get wealthy, therefore, more and more working class families don't have to have their wives working. The wife is able to stay at home and work full-time as a mother, making meals, sewing things for her children and things like that. So, amongst the women that are still working, and there's a sizable amount, but overall we see the number of women that are not working outside the house increase. Let me just say that because of these job opportunities being closed off in mines, factories, and other things as a result of laws against the exploitation of women, many women therefore will be working at home, doing those cottage industry things like making buttons and yarn and gloves and scarves and these other things. So they won't be producing those big textiles that are being churned out in these factories, but they will be producing these other smaller items. Now, amongst women that are still working, though, in the late 19th century, there is also a movement there's new jobs that begin to open up because of economic growth. These are jobs like clerks at department stores, receptionists in the offices of doctors, in the offices of lawyers, in the offices of a growing middle-class population. Secretaries. And of course, with the mandatory, universal education laws that are passed, teachers. And so women will be the teachers for these millions of millions of children that will be educated in the late 19th century. Okay, and this is a fundamental change because now the masses will be educated. We have not seen this before. So, middle-class women, the model is the cult of domesticity. Certainly that continues. And so, as we noted, even from working-class families, that's still the ideal is that the woman has her role in the house. But for middle-class women, there are opportunities. The opportunities outside the house are quite limited. And teaching is one of the most prominent ones for a middle-class woman. Now, amongst the upper middle class, amongst this, sort of the upper bourgeoisie, we have the beginnings of the feminist movement in the 19th century.